Hi, I am Rebecca. I am the psych coach, and today I am going to be talking to you about how to forget about your ex. Lots of people post a breakup want to forget about their ex. They want to forget that they ever existed. They want to forget that they were ever a part of their lives. But actually, what is often the case is your ex continues to live rent-free in your head because you are obsessing about them so much. It's really frustrating, and it certainly doesn't help with the grieving process of the relationship. And although it's a natural part of a relationship breakup to obsess about your ex, it's not the most enjoyable bit. And there are certain things that you may be doing that are exacerbating the tendency you have to obsess about your ex. I am going to talk today about some cognitive strategies that can be useful for trying to decrease the amount of time you're spending thinking about your ex. From a cognitive behavioural therapy perspective, there is of course the theory that when we engage in certain behaviours, we fuel certain cognitions. Okay, so the way we behave affects how we think, and the way we think affects how we behave. So if we can tweak some of our thought processes and if we can tweak some of our behaviours, the end outcome changes. What's the end outcome we're looking for here? You thinking about your ex less. So rule number one is stop Googling them. Googling, Instagramming, Facebooking, whatever it is that you are doing, stop. It's not helpful. The more you engage in an obsessive behaviour, the more you fuel the cognitive obsession. The same can be said for if someone's waiting for exam results and they are constantly hitting, refresh throughout the day. All they're going to be doing is increasing a preoccupation with something that is already very, very dominant. If someone is waiting to go on a holiday to see if their flight is being cancelled, just constantly pressing refresh on their phone is just going to increase and heighten the anxiety that's already felt by that individual. So try very hard not to Google or stalk people online and try and find out things. It's not helpful, and the obsessive behaviour does just fuel the problem. Tip number 2 is to stop talking about your ex. Talking is a behaviour. The more you engage in that behaviour, the more you fuel the cognitive obsession. Don't talk about your ex. Of course, if you're going through a grieving process, there is a natural element to talking about the angst that you're feeling, to talking about the pain that you're in. But what is not helpful is to go over old ground repeatedly, and especially when it's talking about happy memories as well. Going over the pain of the happy memories that you've had and how they aren't to be anymore, and wanting people to listen to you talk about that. A little bit of chatting is fine, but do try and put a ban on yourself if you're meeting up with friends, that after the initial outpouring that you've got, that you don't talk about them again, or the same with texting if you're talking to friends, not mentioning your ex. Mentionitis, as it's known, can be a very real symptom of getting over heartbreak and obsessing about an ex. But the more you talk about them, the more you fuel the obsession. So try very hard to set rules with yourself about how much you are going to talk about them. Tip number 3 is to stop finding out what they are up to. So I said in tip number 1 that you ought to stop doing your internet research of them on LinkedIn and Google and whatever it is. But tip 3 is stopping finding out what they're up to. That means speaking with friends of friends. That means if you're going along to situations or events that you wouldn't normally have gone to, but there's some kind of loose connection with your ex there, so you want to go along in case they're there, or in case you have contact with somebody who does have more contact with your ex, so they can tell you a bit more about what they're up to. You do not need to know. It's normal to be curious about what your ex is up to, whether they're dating or not, what job they're still doing, whether they're thinking about you, whether they've mentioned you, whether they want to get back with you. But it's not helpful to your grieving process to find out what they're up to. You have to work from the basis that even though you want to know what they're up to, even though you really, really want to get some information about them, it will serve you no purpose. Now, I know cognitively you are more than aware of that, the same way that you're aware that Google's stalking talking and researching isn't going to serve a purpose. The same way that you're aware that continually talking about them isn't helpful nor particularly interesting for your friends. So of course you're going to know that trying to track down what they're up to via some loose connection to their friendship group or family isn't a sensible thing to do. It doesn't stop the impulse from being there. But as a human being, you have the control to be able to say, no, I am not going to engage with that desire. I'm not going to pursue trying to find a bit of information out that actually I really don't need to find out. You've got control over that. Sometimes people will convince themselves that they will just sort of, that they just will, I don't know, by chance find something out, or it was just a pure coincidence that I ended up wanting to go somewhere where my ex's best friend was. And actually really think about, is that really the case? Do you really want to go along to that event? Or does this sort of what feels like quite an irrelevant decision about your ex, is it actually just fueled by you wanting to find information out? If it is, don't go. Do whatever you can to reduce the amount of information you get about your ex, because you can do nothing with it. Tip number 4 to reduce your obsession is to allocate obsessive time. If you're really, really in the depths of mulling over your ex and thinking about them so much and trying to make sense of it all, then allocate some obsession time to it. Obsession time is where you allow yourself half an hour at the start of the day, half an hour in the middle of the day, half hour at the end of the day, to really focusing on the thing that you're obsessing about. Worry time sounds a bit counterintuitive because I'm here talking to you about stopping obsessing, yet I'm saying on the other hand, yes, allow yourself to obsess. But if your obsession / worrying about your ex has got to a point where it's constantly taking over your brain space, then you need to try and get a degree of control over it. So that means thinking about your ex for half an hour in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, or whatever else feels manageable. By allocating time, you are telling your brain, I'm asserting a little bit of control here. Just because I want to engage in this thought process, I don't have to. That will strengthen the muscle of being able to turn away from the obsessive thoughts when they enter your head. But in the interim, each time they enter your head, you have to think, I will engage with that thought process in about 2 hours when it's my allocated obsession time. It will help you gain a little bit more control. And tip number 5 is to not look over old photos. Sitting, scrolling through your phone at all the old photos of the selfies that you've taken, the holidays that you've been on, the days out you went on, the things you did for your anniversaries, the restaurants you went to, do not do it. I don't mean to say delete them, never look at them again. It could well be that there's a time in the future where it feels perfectly healthy to look back and to reminisce and think, oh, that was a nice time. But if you are in the depths of obsessing about your ex, and indeed in the depths of heartbreak, it's not the time to be poring over all the old photos, thinking about how good it would be if they were still around. Photos are very emotive. They're a really good way of getting people to feel motivated about doing things. They're a really good incentive for getting us to feel good if we need to stay on track with exercising or with whatever goal it is we want to achieve. They are very emotive things, and for that reason they should be avoided if you are feeling particularly emotionally vulnerable when it comes to obsessing about your ex. Again, it will serve no purpose. What we're after here is you reducing the amount of time you're spending obsessing and instead focusing on the stuff that would bring some enjoyment to your life in the long term. Something that would, I don't know, give you a bit of a boost. That could be going out, it could be doing a bit of socializing, it could be reading, it could be learning something new. Just something that adds a little more to your current life than reminiscing about an ex and looking over the photos that are simply quite traumatic for you to see. Don't spend your time doing that now, and trust, as you recover, sure, you can choose to do that, and it will probably take up less emotional energy than it would now. I know it's really tricky to forget about an ex, but if you are able to engage in the behaviours that I've spoken about, and indeed the decrease in the behaviours I've spoken about, and indeed engage in the cognitive strategy of obsessive time and allocating that, you will put yourself in better stead for thinking about them less. Remember that the more you engage in obsessive behaviours, the more you fuel the thought process. So stop the behaviours, allocate obsessive time, and see how you get on over the coming weeks. It's going to be slow progress, but it will certainly get better if you have done what I said. If you've enjoyed today's tips, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will give you plenty more tips on how you can use psychology on a day-to-day basis.